Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Hello and welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. Today, I'm speaking with another beautiful young yoga teacher, Bobbi Paidel. We met, well, you'll hear all about how we met and her story about moving to India and living in an ashram, meeting her guru in Vedic studies and non-dualism. And we're going to just dive right into the heart of what is yoga, what's the teachings of yoga, as well as look at the path that she took to bring her to where she is today, which is an international yoga teacher who has traveled the world and taught at many similar places that I have, including the Nosin Retreat Center for the Yoga Festival, the International Yoga Festival that they host each year. And I can't wait for you to meet her. It's a really surprising and lovely conversation with somebody who is just so inspired by her practice and really uses her practice to create wholeness and healing in her own personal life. And I think that it will also inspire you in questioning and reflecting on what you're using your yoga practice for and the motivations you have around your practice. So let's dive in. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony, and I am here today with my beautiful guest, Bobbi Paidel. Hello, Bobbi. How are you?
Hi, Harmony. I'm great. It's great to be here. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too. We've been in conversation for a long time, and we're both from Alberta.
It's amazing. It's like, I love that. Yeah.
Just 3 hours north of each other, but oh my God, it was a real challenge to find a time for us to connect.
That's so true, yeah.
You travel a lot, and then I'm also traveling off and on, and we were never in the same place at the same time where we could find a connection.
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
But yeah, and even right now, you're not in Alberta, you're in Sweden.
Yeah.
And how is life in Sweden?
It's amazing. It's like pretty interesting, like adapting to a different culture when it's like, it's like a different mindset when you're a visitor somewhere or when you're like, okay, I'm going to try to live here and kind of integrate into Swedish culture and society. It's a little different, but it's all good practice, Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's Europe, so that's always wonderful.
It's true. Yeah, it is. And it's beautiful here. And the summer is the best time to move anywhere that's in a colder climate. So then I'll be adapted by time the darkness and the wet comes.
Yeah, but I don't think it'll be so much different than Edmonton.
Well, I mean, I'm from actually southern Alberta, but here
southern.
It's like
Lethbridge,
like Crow's Nest Pass area.
Crow's Nest.
Yeah.
It'll be similar. Don't worry.
Well, I think like I'm gonna miss the sun. Like here, it's like Vancouver, like rainy and gray and like yeah. So
yeah,
we'll see.
But you can travel to India in the winter.
It's true, and it's
like
so
all
close.
Good English people.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's good. It's all a new European adventure, so I'm super stoked to be here. Yeah.
Good. And we just missed each other in Norway at Nosin Retreat Center. I was there teaching a retreat a couple months back, and then you were just there like a week or two ago, I think, for the yoga festival, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which I also saw that you were hosting a retreat there. I'm like, okay, this is crazy how the paths are crossing. But it was also my first time in Norway, and it's such a magical place that they have there. It was so fun teaching and just sharing. Everyone was so open and cool, and the food was great. Like, wow, it was great.
Yeah. Wonderful. Good. I'm so glad. I'm glad you had a beautiful time. Yeah, there's a lot of great teachers at that festival they host.
There really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you find anyone that you really enjoyed connecting with or studying with?
Yeah, like Magnus Freed, I met, and he was such a beautiful guy, and I'm hoping actually to have him on my podcast. And then we were there. There was like a big group of us, well, like 5 of us from my ashram in India. So one of the guys that's from our ashram, he's in his 50s, but he started going to India when he was 12 with his family, like in the 80s, and he lives near Noosan, and he's like a Sanskrit scholar and like an author, and so he's had connected with Alex at Noosan and kind of brought us along for me to teach yoga, and another girl, Zinja from Germany, to sing kirtan. And so we were kind of just like this little bubble that we were all connected from India, and he kind of helped us get connected to the Norway crew. So it was kind of just amazing to be sharing in that space with those friends that I'm usually in India with in the ashram. So we I loved that part of it also.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, let's get into India then. Tell me about your journey. How did you start yoga in the Crow's Nest Pass, which is very not populated area, and then end up at an ashram in India? How did this all happen for you?
Yeah, well, it's like obviously a long story, but I started yoga. I was actually living in Edmonton. I did my dance degree there, and I have scoliosis. So my ballet teacher said, like, you should try yoga. So, as many people do, they go to yoga for something physical, and then something deeper opens. And I started yoga, and I just started doing it regularly. And even though I was getting some kind of benefit from it in a deeper way, I really struggled for most of my young adult life with alcohol, drugs, like different types of maladaptive coping mechanisms, mental health issues, and kind of very chaotic life. Even though I had this kind of yoga practice on the side, I still was really suffering and really unwell inside and disconnected, and I had never any thought or any desire even to go to India. I thought, like, that's for advanced travelers. And before I went to India, I had made it to Australia, which was like so exotic for me, small town Alberta girl. And I kind of reached the bottom of the amount of suffering I could take with myself there. And a really good friend of mine had been living in India for 3 years, and she suggested, like, why don't you come to India? And I was like, oh no, like, no way, Jose. And anyways, long story short, she actually got me a job there working. Yes, so I used to work as a wardrobe stylist, so also like totally unrelated realm of work. But she got me a job working in northern India in a like high-end clothing boutique, kind of selling cool, kitschy items and saris to like well-off Delhiite ladies. Like, it's so, yeah. So I ended up also.
That's so interesting.
Very unusual. And I kind of was like, okay, I have no money. I'm super depressed. I'll just go take this job. And before I left Australia, I had started going to the Buddhist center. Like, all over the world, Buddhist centers offer meditation and puja type ceremonies for free. And I kind of just started going, thinking like, I need something to help me with my mind. And just something aside, so let me try to learn meditation. So as soon as I got to India, I said to my friend, like, do you know somewhere in this area where I can practice yoga and learn meditation? And she said, well, actually, like, I live in an ashram. I was like, oh, well, what's an ashram? I had no idea. And we started talking, and she started sharing her satsang notes with me that she was learning in the ashram, and it was of the Advaita Vedanta tradition. And I remember she was sharing with me what she was learning, and I just kind of like broke down, and I was really like, what is this knowledge? And she's like, well, this is what we learn in the ashram. This is the tradition of Advaita Vedanta. It's a type of yoga. And there was kind of a bit of confusion, but I was so interested because it sounded like something that kind of gave a bit of reprieve to the suffering, even in that moment. And so on the Sunday, you could go to the ashram. It was a closed ashram for visitors. So I went and I met my teacher. His name is Swami Sham. He passed away 5 years ago, but he was an old man at that time, and he was giving a satsang, and I was like, "What is this?" I kind of was like had flashbacks of like church, but like I like he was speaking about yoga and oneness, and it was kind of like really lighting me up, and like about freedom and what is freedom for the yogi, and what is a seeker, and who am I, like all these deep questions that I was asking, that I really felt so isolated in the questions that I had. And meeting the community and actually getting a doorway into what is meditation and how to meditate just started to slowly open something up inside of me, that I went and stayed at that ashram for 3 months, and then have continued to go back every year since, and really study and apply the principles in the Vedas and the yogic texts in the way that my teacher translated them and shared them. So that kind of like, I was kind of already practicing yoga, but that kind of shot me in like such a direction of wanting to embrace all deeper aspects of yoga. Like I've loved the asana practice always. I grew up dancing, so I love it. But I really love the meditation and studying those principles that we can apply to our life in all aspects.
Yeah, the deeper dimensions.
Exactly, yeah. So that's kind of the long story short of like how I really started to want to put all my attention and live my life in a way that supports going to satsang and sharing satsang and meditating and yoga and all that good stuff. And eventually it's what helped get me sober and helped me overcome mental health issues. And things are still difficult, but to have those tools, it's just like living a life I never thought possible 10 years ago. I really thought like I'm going to have to suffer through this existence for like, it just, it's so amazing to reflect back and see the parallels of the way we can experience life through the visions that are available, or the tools that are available in yoga.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like that's such a commonality between people that really come to yoga and resonate with it at this deeper level. Is there's something that's like an acute existential suffering that they're experiencing um, at often a young age, but that seems to follow throughout. Like uh, it's interesting. I'm not really sure what causes this deep existential suffering. Do you have any insights into why it was that you were like what was it that was, creating, maybe like the eating disorders? Was it just like the dancing? Was it the inner critic? Was it your family upbringing? Like what was it that was trying to make you escape, or like the catalyst to that, trying to find escape? Because really that's what we're trying to do through like drugs or alcohol or controlling our situations so much, right? We're trying to escape this sense of suffering or deeper dissatisfaction or dis-ease with our life.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you noted that, because it's also kind of a thread I've noticed through doing my podcast, and like kind of getting curious about to kind of see the similarities in other people's stories. And you're right, there is this kind of, I like to call it the divine uneasiness. Like it's that disillusionment with the world where it's like you're kind of like, it's like the matrix is flickering. And I think when we don't have those tools, that's when I think about all the work that I've done through sobriety, and like addiction is really maladaptive coping mechanisms. So if we don't have those tools to actually deal with the difficult times in life, like that's when numbing comes, and it exists on a spectrum as well. Like, you know, at Newson, we kind of had a lot of these conversations because they have the Back in the Ring Foundation working with ex-addicts and convicts. So we had that kind of dialogue about how for one person it might just be something like, you know, binging Netflix and numbing out, and for another it might be alcohol, drugs, sex, disordered eating. Like, you know, it's kind of like grabbing for the lowest hanging fruit. And I think for me it's also been interesting because it's kind of been through yoga and through 12 steps and through therapy and many other things of kind of like putting the puzzle pieces together of why am I like this, which I think on a cognitive level has been beneficial, but on a spiritual level, it's kind of, you know, you kind of have to hold these two truths at once. Like, we have to do the kind of work for the mechanism and the individual and look at these ways that I've learned and do the unlearning and those kind of things. And the work of the yoga, which is like the kind of essence and using the practices to keep arriving at the awareness that like I am whole, complete, perfect because I am a part of that higher consciousness, whatever language we want to put on it. So it's been interesting for me, and I think my suffering, like that I felt like since a young age, it's like just a sense of not belonging, or I always felt like a black sheep. Like, how did I end up on a farm out here in the middle of Alberta? Like, I had literally felt like an alien, and so kind of, you know, like, and what is it that makes a person feel separate? It's something that's disconnected one from the self. And through just that first meeting with my teacher and hearing the words that actually you've never been separate from the self, in fact you are the self, was kind of like the nectar, like the water I was so thirsty to hear, because we all want that, to know that we're perfect regardless of the imperfections of this mechanism and this body that I don't like. You're right, because I grew up dancing. It was so much body image, and having scoliosis, I was always kind of turning that way. You know, I was like, I was always off kilter. So kind of like what brings us back into balance, you know, that's the real been the grace of my life, to have this work and to keep doing it every day. It's like continual, and I know when I miss my practice, or I don't meditate, or I'm not in good company with satsangis or yogis, it's hard out there.
Life is hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's interesting. My one of my teachers and mentors in spinal energetics, which I've been practicing recently and facilitating sessions for, is using like network chiropractic and moving prana and energy like through the spine and opening up channels to integrate, you know, trauma, past trauma, with the nervous system. And it's pretty profound and brings a really just an interesting kind of healing on both like an unconscious and conscious level, mind body, you know, blending these Eastern Western techniques and philosophies and practices together. But she said that scoliosis, her name's Dr. Sarah Jane, said that she believes scoliosis is actually spiritual, a very spiritual sort of like deformity, as you might say, right? Like that it happens when young children like often have a very spiritual kind of essence or experiences in their life, and then as they're young teens, they're feeling like they have to suppress this movement of spiritual energy in them to fit in with society, and so it changes their the physical way the spine is.
Wow.
This by suppressing their sort of essence or nature.
Light bulbs. I gotta learn more about this. That's so amazing. That's literally me, how I felt, I swear. Like, we need to talk more about this. Like, tell me more, please.
I know. because I also have scoliosis, and so when she
Oh
was
my God.
talking it this way about it and explaining it this way, I was like, I feel so seen. Oh my God.
Literally. That,
Yeah, it was
wow.
really profound.
Okay.
Yeah, but it changed the way I also related to scoliosis as well. Is like, actually, there's nothing wrong with you.
Mm.
It's that you've tried to shift yourself into a pattern of the what the world wants, or what the world, you know, is expecting of you, or what you're projecting the world is expecting of you, and not feeling accepted for whatever reason, either internally or externally. And yeah, it's interesting.
Very interesting. And that's so interesting. Like, for me, like, I still have some slight scoliosis, but the last time I had my back x-rayed, like, the doctor was kind of, like, so, wow, like, you basically cured your scoliosis through yoga and this and that. And, like, I can still feel a tendency to want to lean, but actually, like, wow, how amazing is that bringing oneself into right alignment, like, filters out through body. We bring our body into right alignment, we bring our spirit into right alignment, and our mind. Like, how cool
Yeah.
is that?
Yeah, totally. I know. And the same thing happened for me too. It was quite bad. They were going to do surgery on my spine when I was younger, because it was quite an extreme scoliosis. And then when I started practicing yoga when I was 18, slowly, but like over some time, it's almost, not quite,
Mm.
come straight. But
Mm.
it's still there, like you say, a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I mean, also because it's turned into like a physical, it's not just like, there's two types of scoliosis. One is functional, like if you play tennis, sometimes you get scoliosis, or golfing, right? Because you're always doing something on one side, not on the other side, right? But there's also the functional, or not functional, structural scoliosis, where the spine is a little twisted. And I think that's more of this kind of spiritual
Mm.
hiding that happens, maybe.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's interesting. It's a fascinating, um, way to look at it.
Totally. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that.
And what is your spiritual practice now? I mean, you started with asana, like many of us, and I find it interesting that you were practicing asana, and it was bringing some relief and some sense of, connection, maybe to your body, um, some sense of peace. It sounded like, and it was leading you more to meditation. It sounded like also. But what is your practice now, like after, being immersed in this Advaita Vedanta ashram, and going deep into the philosophy and the meditation practices, and I'm assuming chanting and kirtan as a part of that? Like, what does it look like living at the ashram, or also how do you bring that practice like where you are now in Sweden?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about all the tools that are available in Indian or Eastern traditions. Like, it's kind of limitless that we can turn to so many different practices. And the more we immerse ourselves in those traditions that are not of our culture, the more we're able to utilize them, like you said about the spinal work, like bringing the East and the West together. And I think it's so valuable, and it's been so amazing for me, like I said, for my sobriety. Like, one thing that's so helpful for those, including myself, recovering from addictions or compulsions or addictive behavior, is having routine and structure. And I also have ADHD, so like having that daily practice is so essential for me. It's more beneficial than ADHD medication. Like, I've tried it all, and like I've said, like, I think, like, for me, like, it's way more powerful if I just do my practice like every day. I wake up, I always meditate, I chant, I do pranayama, I do asana, and obviously it always depends, like if I have more time or less energy, or if I'm teaching a morning class, like, but without fail, like, I make every effort to have a morning practice, and it always includes pranayama, asana, and meditation. And I also love to read scriptures or books that my teacher translated or commentated on, and just have something in the morning to like bring the awareness back in. Because as soon as I open my eyes, and I think as soon as all of us open our eyes in the morning, we just go from that pure state of sleep, and we just open our eyes, and then back comes the Bobbi with her weird mind and her scoliosis and all her problems, and like it just kind of and like it can just come like so fast. So to have that practice in the morning in the privacy of my own little corner in my own little room, where it's not dependent on a teacher, it's not dependent on a studio, it's dependent on my own being recognizing itself. And I know it works, because it when I don't do it shows in my life. So that's definitely essential. And another part of my sadhana that my teacher like very much emphasized is the importance of satsang and good company, and making sure that we have conversations like these where we get inspired by other people, and we discuss the knowledge, and we discuss how we can apply the principles into our lives, and where we forget and when we remember. And for me, that's also been so essential. So the last kind of 10 years since I really started prioritizing my own sadhana, like my friends have changed, which has been difficult but also kind of essential. I went from being the party girl on the bar table, like hanging out with the DJs and the drug dealers, to like going to hang out with like 75-year-old yogis in India, like loving that. So yeah, that's my practice. And it's really my lifeline. Like I'm so thankful, forever thankful, to have that kind of medicine every day, and it's free. And I just have to open a book, and I get some kind of hit of knowledge, and it brings me back into focus. And then I pick up the Bobbi again, and then I go do the job and the teaching and the learning Swedish and all these things. But it's like remembering the self first and then moving outward, I think, is kind of my work. And remembering that, and then I forget, like we all do. And then that friction comes, like we said, that divine uneasiness. And it's just a reminder, okay, we got to put a little bit more attention back on closing the eyes, pausing, stillness, remember who you are, remember the self, and then move forward. So that's kind of I call it the cha-cha sadhana, like 2 steps back. No, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Exactly. It's kind of like that. It is a dance. There's joy in it. Yeah. There's such joy in it. And sometimes it's hard to like kind of not want to exist like in the matrix and kind of live with blinders on. It can be difficult.
Yeah, I love that you bring this up, because it is such a interesting kind of like dance, yes. And going through moments of feeling like so expansive and connected with everything, and then kind of back into the ego self of just like feeling separate and like nothing's working, and then opening up into like, like abundant beauty and unexpressed like joy and love, and just like beyond words. And then all of a sudden you're like, getting an email, and you're like, oh God, that person again. Leave me alone, And so it's really, it becomes, like you say, like a dance, or it can be quite playful once you start to see like also that it's all kind of an illusion. Like it's all just what it is. And that, our minds, or our spirit, our focus can go from like opening into this great vast awareness, and being, in the ocean of consciousness, to then like kind of becoming profoundly specific and trapped in our little particle self. that's like, really taking everything very personally, to then like opening up again into the ocean. And I think for a long time that's sort of where we exist as spiritual devotees and practitioners, in this sort of this ebb and this flow, or this waxing and waning of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's really a kind of fun and also kind of frustrating experience
Yeah.
to witness and to be a part of, both witnessing and experiencing and being a part of all at the same time.
Totally. Yeah, it's like kind of, I love that analogy of it being like a kind of a show. Like it is kind of just expressing itself. And I think for me anyway, it's like so much of the work has been like, okay, if I want to open my arms up to the joys and the feel goods of life, like there has to be some kind of equal effort to open the arms up to the lessons and the challenges and the things, that we naturally obviously want to shy away from. Like naturally, if you said like you suck at this podcast interview and close the camera, like I wouldn't like it. But how can we like still remain just watching and aware of the not liking and the liking and the, my own quirks and dislikes? It's kind of, it's almost like the kind of a laboratory or something. The whole life is like an experiment, and slowly I'm starting to notice, and I feel I definitely have a long way to go on my journey of spiritual work, but looking back at the way I experienced reality 10 years ago and how consistent that sense of identifying with the particle self was there, now like it's just so obvious. Like space does get created, and it does come out of the meditation practice and out of the asana practice. Like the more that we show up for the practice, the more it just naturally seeps into the situations, the challenges, the relationships, the work, and the way that I process reality. I really have seen that there is more space, and it comes without effort, because the effort is done on the mat and then just, or on the seat, however we want to say, and then, oh, oh, hello.
You're back.
I'm back.
Yeah, you froze for a second.
I was like really
You froze.
I was on a tangent there. I don't know where
you froze in space.
Yes, I'm that spacious.
I see that there is more space.
Yeah,
And then the space was created.
exactly. This is exactly my point. Nice.
It was a good demonstration of it. Um, what texts have you read or studied that you found most helpful? People always ask me this, like, well, what text should I read? I mean, standard answers are sort of Yoga Sutras and Bhagavad Gita, but do you have some other texts that you found really valuable in your own growth?
Yes, and I also love to ask this question too, because I love reading these kind of different knowledge pathways that lead us to the same truth. I think one time, I don't know where I heard it, if it was from my teacher or somewhere else, that all rivers lead to the same ocean. So I love that there are so many different scriptures, and my kind of like go-tos are that one is the Bhagavad Gita. My teacher translated it 7 times, so there's a few different commentaries that he did. And this other scripture, his translation is called Light of Knowledge, but it's Vivek Chudamani. It's a Shankaracharya book, and it's so, so beautiful. And one book that I go to again and again and again is I Am That by Nisargadatta. It's so good. Like I just always I just flip it and I love it because it's just clear clear teachings and clear vision of like an enlightened being that's just directing the devotee, directing the questioner again and again, again and again in all different ways. And it shows kind of like you read the questions. I love that part also, getting to read the questioners, because I can relate to the sense of confusion that can come from any imaginable angle, like the kind of, but the real question that we all ask and want to know is like how to remain forever at ease and peace and happy. Like that's what we all want. And again in so many profound and beautiful ways, the teaching is to recognize you're already that. And it's so simple,
Yeah.
but yet it's like eternally the question, because just like you said before, we remember, we're expanded, we're the self, and then like zoom, like a vortex, we're like this small little person with so many problems again. It's just the eternal kind of spiritual puzzle that we're here figuring out, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. What I find is so interesting. I mean, when I started this path, I mean, so many years ago, I mean, really so many years ago, if you take into account not just yoga, but like my interest in spiritual practices and in God and in prayer and meditation. And it's been like a lifelong kind of study of the divine. But that I think, it used to be very, even like spirituality and spiritual practices. And when we look at like, it was very religious in a way, right? Like segregated into specific kind of religious groups or practices. And I feel that, I mean, probably since the internet, um, and just like the expanse of travel as well, of people being able to go to other cultures and countries, um, that consciousness also has expanded so much. And there's seems to be, I mean, on one hand, it's all an illusion. So it seems to be that there's more people, waking up in a way. There's more people opening up to an experience of the self, or an experience of universal love, or an experience of pure awareness, and having these moments of like opening than, probably 25, 30 years ago, where it, it was maybe less available for people, but now there's so much accessibility compared to, 30 or even 40 years ago, where it was, you were kind of like really weird if you were into Eastern traditions and spirituality. I mean, even most of the hippies stopped being into Eastern religion and spirituality. Um, but now it's very open, and you have the Buddhists. I mean, and again, the Buddhists are talking to the Christians, who are talking to the Muslims, who are talking to the Hindus, and so on the one hand, there's maybe a fraction of society that's getting more secularized, not secularized, segregated, or more like like closed or contracted, because they're afraid of the expansion. But I feel like there's so much more of the population that are opening into this more expansive, inclusive, like love, that I don't know, that I feel just wasn't even talked about as an option before, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is something I've also thought about and considered, because I think it's so inspiring. Like for me, as someone that kind of felt also weird being like a spiritual kid, and like now I got scoliosis because of it. Like because because I feel like, so there, when I started to kind of turn on and open my own experience to spirituality, and there was a kind of sense of like, oh, I'm not alone here. And I was really glad for it. And like I said, I'm eternally grateful to have the practices. And I also think that it's such a time where the yogi or the spiritual seeker has to really apply the critical thinking, because there is so much out there that it can kind of become overwhelming, or like one that is sincerely open and ready for some kind of great shift or great opening in their life. Like one can be vulnerable to kind of the foo-foo, like kind of, I don't know, I don't want to put any names on anything, but like, because there is so much out there. So like, how can we stay innocent and pure in our search and apply our critical thinking to make sure we're not being led astray? And I think, just spending a lot of time in India, which I know you have also, where a lot of seekers go, and there's a lot of like fakes out there, or like information that's maybe not gonna actually guide us to freedom. So I think it's so amazing, and then it's like that end bit, we have to think like,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
apply the critical thinking.
Yeah, that's kind of the other extreme in a way, right? Like there's like, we're not gonna explore outside of our own tradition at all. We're just gonna like really hold to our tradition and stay I keep remembering and forgetting that word, but secretarian, like segregated, and then there's like this kind of opening up into being open to other possibilities and other traditions. And then there's like really kind of being open, but then also having someone come and take advantage of that openness. And all of a sudden you end up in a cult where it's also, again, very like contracted and segregated and like not open to other options also. So it's really actually kind of fun and fascinating to think about that, like always on these extreme sides of things is the polarization in a way. Whether it's polarization in a way that is disguised as openness, but I mean, even I know many yoga practitioners that are searching for truth and awareness and consciousness, but then it's like, but you have to do it this way. And it's like, really? Is that the only way to find truth and consciousness and universal love? I actually don't think that is a reality.
Yeah.
Right? And it's no different than the Christians saying, like, you have to do it this way, or, whoever, right? So it's kind of an interesting thing that you can also get kind of taken advantage of or turn into the very thing that you maybe felt like you didn't belong in a certain place or situation, and then you find a place of belonging, but now you belong, and now you're in it so deep that you almost like are afraid to leave or explore anymore because you don't want to not belong anymore.
Yeah,
that's also an interesting place to be, because now you're right back at the place where you started.
Yeah, it's very interesting, like that concept, or not even concept, teaching that like the mind can free us and the mind can bind us, and even our desire for freedom can give us the opposite result of freedom. And it's like, it's such a trickster. Like the mind is a trickster, and actually like God is the trickster also. Like it's kind of this continual, the dance of like fine, and like the yogi's path, or like they say in Buddhism, like the middle path is like, how can we explore just enough and remain established in our true inner, true north, like awareness, with a clear mind that isn't going to get pulled or swayed and ultimately create more bondage, which is going to make us suffer. It's like, that's the work, and how easily, like I find I'm, like when we're talking about the illusion, like I get so kind of pulled into the world, like in two ways, like totally twofold. Like I see like two sides of the same coin. Like the world is so attractive and sparkly and like that looks good, or like let's move here, do that. And then similarly, like the world is so destructive and disturbed and messed up right now, and that can pull me the other way. And then I've forgotten, in getting pulled either positively or negatively, I get so pulled from my seat of awareness that then I have to come back and remember, like, this is all a show, and it is valuable. The human incarnation is the highest incarnation. We're so blessed to have this body because it's the only body on the earth, this human body, that has the capacity to recognize its source nature. Like, so I see the brilliance in the whole show, and I see how easy it is to get caught in it. And that's also something I struggle with, and I have to really work at, is to still feel compassion and excitement and joy and empathy in the world for all that goes on both sides of the polarities, and to remain kind of a little bit steady, even though you kind of, it's hard not to get
Feel
pulled.
yourself moving.
Yeah, like it's tough days out there, and like there's so much going on that's so disturbing and rightfully deserves our attention. And we need to give these things that are happening in the world our attention, and similarly find joy in all the small things, like we have to kind of keep holding and juggling and remain.
Yeah.
It's so, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're really bringing a beautiful kind of illustration to the importance of the middle way, and this idea of when we really look at the middle way of it being holding awareness and finding your seat and being steady and still, because when you're in the middle, you're not, like you say, being pulled in one direction or the other. You're just balanced, like in the middle. And so, and when you're in the middle, you're present, which plants you in the now, which is the place where there really is no suffering, in the now, because our suffering always exists in our mind, in the future or the past or some imagination. And I was getting this image as you were talking, and I think Ramana Maharshi often spoke of it, the world being like a movie, and us getting, you know, thinking that we're, being so moved by the movie that we're crying and we're like believing it's all real, but it's all actors. And I was getting this image of you, of not you, but like of us as practitioners, as devotees, like sitting in the audience of a play, and then like getting so immersed in the play as we're watching it that we're like jumping out of our seats and up on stage, like participating, like, like going to war, or like crying with the, with the suffering, and then like all of a sudden recognizing we're on stage and being like, oh, I'm gonna go sit back down now.
Yeah.
and, and how life is sort of this process of this kind of happening, right? Like we get so caught up in it, and we think that we're a part of it and that it's really real and happening, and then every once in a while you're like, oh, I'm gonna go sit back down now. I feel like your meditation practice, as you're describing it, as this little sanctuary and time to check in with yourself, is really like, putting yourself back in the seat so that you're like, oh yeah, that's the play and this is me.
Totally,
And then
yeah.
throughout the day, you might find yourself on stage, reenacting Hamlet or something, and then be like, wait a second, I'm just going to go sit back down now.
Yeah. Totally. Like, I think it's so important that we have that practice, whatever someone's practice is. Like, it doesn't have to be yoga. Like, for somebody, maybe it's going for a run or whatever the practice is that brings you back, because we still have to take action in the world. Like, it's so essential right now that we take right action and advocate and move forward with like bringing that expression of one love and peace and harmony into practicality, which requires us to act and do hard things, but it feels impossible to do anything unless we have that stillness inside oneself. And then like the play goes on inevitably, and we just keep doing the parts, and of course we pick up the roles, but like it's, I guess, about remembering like the actor that goes and trains for the movie, once he's done the part, like he goes back to himself or herself, and that really feels like the remembering, or like in the analogy of the play or the movie, I love the vision that like you and me and us as that true self is the canvas or the stage on which everything is played, and we just, by the tendency of the mind, which by nature, by design, it's knows black or white, it's binary by nature, and how easy it is to get stuck in that, which is why it's so essential we come back to that awareness of ourselves as the canvas, or in fact, as if it's a movie, we're the light that shines the movie. It's like but the mind kind of can't even grasp that. Like I read somewhere something, or I heard maybe on a podcast, I get all these like nuggets, and I'm like, I really want to quote that or remember where I heard that. But it was that we have no language for God, so we have to use these kind of metaphors and explain or visualize or explore the concept of God or self in ways that like it's such a stretch for the mind. It's like the mind goes like I can't compute that, because the mind is only existing in this individual me, and then we're trying to get the mind to grasp that the self is all permeating. It's kind of a stretch,
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I love that, to take the sort of play metaphor even further beyond conception, is then at some point you realize that you're just watching the person sitting there and all the people on stage, and that you are actually all of them at the same time. And at that point our minds just like stops computing and is like, I don't get it.
Yeah, and then you just close your eyes like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or like you're saying, the projector, we're actually the light projecting the film, and it's like, what? Okay.
Yeah.
And those are the beautiful things, I think, that like a koan in Buddhism, that stop the mind, and you have to like open up into that space beyond language, beyond words, beyond thinking, and then you're like, and in that split second you're there, like you get it, but then the mind comes back and is like, yeah, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Or it tries to make sense of it, and then you're back in the play of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I think is why like it's so clear that it's a practice and it's continual, because also the way the mind works, we want to like tick it off and say like, yeah, like self-realized, got that, like now I can go on to the next thing. And it's like my teacher, he said like, you will not reach self-realization and then not be yourself or stop meditating. You'll be realized and be you, harmony, and you'll keep meditating and you'll keep knowing the self. And that's how it goes. Like we just keep the practice going. It's like if I think for a second that it's not continual, like it reflects in the way that I'm experiencing all the ebbs and flows of life, and then it's like just shows like this is a long game kind of practice, which is also a joy in it, that we get to mature our sadhana and mature our understanding and go through the phases of life with these practices until the very last breath. Like meditation doesn't require any body. Like you just close your eyes and there you are. And I think that's why I just love to share that and live that, because it's for all phases of life, for all people, because we close our eyes and there we are, that same light. And it's so simple, but not easy, but it's simple.
Yeah. 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 100%. 100%. I think that's also where the Gita, like you were talking about, how important it is to act and to be in the world. And I think sometimes when we engage in spiritual practice or become a practitioner or devotee and a seeker, we emphasize like withdrawing from the world. And that's actually not the point. The point is that, yes, there is a withdrawing in a sense, but that withdrawing gives you more compassion for the world and for people and for beings and for being of action in the world. Like it like spurs you into action in a way, right?
Yeah, and Gita, there's one line, I can't remember what chapter it is, but it's Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam, which means produce more by doing less. And like, it's such a teaching that I love to remember. Like, actually, when I take action from the seat of stillness or silence or recognizing the Krishna consciousness, which is all permeating, when we act from there, we naturally act with more brilliance and clarity and focus. And like, it's so makes sense, like, and it's there 2,000 years ago, and it still makes sense because the human condition is still the same. When we try to act from the individual sense of I, just like Arjun, we get so confused and contracted, like you said before, like so tight. And like, what lets us act in the world correctly is knowing who we are. And like, that kind of brings me back to remember, like, if I start flailing on the mind level, it's a clear indication I need to meditate and like come back,
Yeah. Yeah, get back in your seat.
Exactly. Just even close my eyes for 5 minutes. Like, I remember my one friend, like, the community where I stay in India, they've been living there for a long time, so most of my friends are like 60, 70 plus, even 80 plus. And she said, no matter what, meditate anywhere you need to. She said, even in the bathroom at an airport, I've meditated. I was like, okay, that's commitment. But I kind of remember that like, we can just, that's the brilliance of meditation also. You can just find a bathroom and close your eyes for like 3 minutes. And my teacher, Swamiji, he said that too. He said, you don't need to change anything in your life. You just add meditation. That was his instruction for self-realization. He said, it's free information, like, that's just it. And it's like, I don't have to change anything, just add meditation. It's so simple and it works. So like, that's the only proof I need.
It's beautiful. Another mentor, a coach mentor of mine, she calls it toilet temple.
Nice. Oh, I'm gonna take that. That's good.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. To listen to Briga, she always says, just go to the toilet temple and take your time. Like, go in and recenter yourself.
Okay, toilet temple. I'm gonna share that with my friend that told me about her toilet temple, and she's like 70. She didn't know that that's what it's called, but I'm gonna tell her.
I mean, I don't know if it's an official term, but I think we can make it official.
Perfect. Nice.
Yeah. It was so beautiful having you as a guest today. Thank you for coming on. Tell everyone how they can find your podcast and where you're teaching and how they can find you online.
Awesome.
Or offline.
Well, my podcast is called Curious Yogi, and I hope to have you on soon also, Harmony. And we have a monthly satsang group on there, which is like the highlight of my month. It's such an amazing time just to come together and talk like this with the listeners. So I love doing that. And then I offer a few classes on Zoom, and all of my schedule is on my website, bobbipaidel.com. And yeah, that's kind of what I'm up to these days. And then just trying to live life in Sweden, getting to teach here and be more in person, because for the last 4 years since COVID, I've been mostly online. So it's all new and exciting.
Yeah. Nice. Well, if you're there in March, my husband Russell and I will be down in Gothenburg. Gothenburg?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for 10 days teaching a workshop and some Mysore classes.
Oh, amazing.
So, yeah, at the end of March. So maybe you'll be there, maybe not. Maybe we can find each other in person.
Actually, the end of March, I will be in India, and I will say this too, that I'm hosting a 2-week retreat in northern India at the end of March. So if the listeners aren't in Gothenburg with you guys, then they can come over to India.
They can come to India.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a good time to be in India too.
Yeah, definitely.
Before it gets too hot. Where's your retreat?
It's in Himachal Pradesh, like in the kind of area that I've spent most of my time, and a little bit in Dharamsala. So we're like kind of traveling around and doing yoga and sadhana and meditating and singing. So it'll be good.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, it sounds divine.
Yeah, it was so nice to chat with you, and really want to find a time to talk with you again for Curious Yogi.
Yes. That sounds wonderful. Hopefully it won't take us 2 years.
Yeah, really.
That was just so amazing. What a fun conversation. I learned so much, and I hope you did too. If you would love to go deeper and take your practice off your yoga mat and into your life, into the world, starting to learn more about pranayama, developing a regular practice, chanting, tuning into the vibrations and the Sanskrit mantras, as well as looking at some of the more esoteric philosophical concepts, come on in to my Inner Circle mentorship. This is a private community that's online. I offer weekly Mysore classes in addition to these monthly workshops and special programs. And you can find out all the information when you join the Finding Harmony community. Head on over to community-harmonyslater.com. Join the community and come on into my Inner Circle mentorship. I would love for you to be a part of this beautiful space and start growing into the full richness of this yoga practice together with me. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.